How many different makers is a really difficult question because we don't know the answer to that. It may sound odd, but very, very few of the guitars, particularly those made in what became East Germany, actually have a maker's name on them. But a lot of those that came from Czechoslovakia didn't have makers' names either. In the Czech case, it's because they had a huge export market, and a lot of the importers wanted to sell them as their own instruments. So in England, you had firms like Boosey and Hawkes or Dallas and Co. And they wanted to sell guitars with their name on them. So they would place an order in Czechoslovakia and say, but don't put anything on that shows where it's made. The reason, however, that it didn't happen in East Germany is quite a different one. Once the war had finished and the Russians had taken control of Saxony, that became East Germany, you had a number of things happen. One, they were cut off from the West German currency. So you had the Reichsmark, which wasn't worth very much, but it was an attempt to establish a currency again in the American, British and French occupied part, which was West Germany. The poor Russians had the Ostmark in the East. Ostmark wouldn't buy you very much. In the 2 or 3 years directly after the Second World War, you got to think you had 25 million displaced people in Europe. 25 million. 3.5 million of them alone had come from Czechoslovakia, mainly into Germany and Austria. Everything was chaos. There was no order. Everything was destroyed. You couldn't find bits of wood. You couldn't find metal. You couldn't telephone somebody. And a lot of trade was done by barter and on the black market. Now, these guys making these guitars initially had to give them to the Russians. For war reparations, the Russians gave them a long bill of fare for musical instruments, zithers and accordions and all sorts of instruments, but including thousands of guitars, which they paid absolute peanuts for, but they had to be delivered each year. So what the workers wanted to do was make, the craftsmen, they wanted to make a nice guitar on the side and sell it to some American soldier for dollars or even for Reichsmarks, because you could buy something with Reichsmarks, you couldn't with Ostmarks. So they would make these guitars with no sign of who'd made them visible to you. They might sign their name underneath the top of it, or like you saw on that, or you will see on the Osbama I'm going to show you, a tiny, tiny little inlay put on the top of it that you wouldn't see casually, and you perhaps wouldn't even be able to work out where they were from. So as I started collecting them, I began to get very curious about how I could work out where they were made.